Hi guys, I'm Sydney Mary, and this is Retired College Athletes, a platform designed to inspire and inform current and former athletes through stories and advice from retired college athletes. And today we are chatting all about the transfer portal. So let's go ahead and get into it. So when I was transferring in 2016, we did not have the same rules that we have today for transfers, which is so good. Like, I'm so glad that things have changed because it makes things more fair for student athletes. For me, when I was ready to leave UVA, it was because I felt like I was in a program that was not a good fit for me. I was in a program where I felt like I wasn't well supported by our coaches, that there was a little bit or a lot of it of gaslighting and manipulation happening, and so I needed to get into a healthier program. Okay, think about that. I'm looking to get into a healthier program for me. But if I want to transfer at that point in time, I have to sit out a year if I don't graduate. That's not necessarily fair, right? I mean, if I just need to get out of a toxic environment, I think I should be able to transfer right away and not have an issue and be able to continue my life. Well, that is the case today. Kids can transfer today, and there are really not a lot of restrictions on how and when or where they transfer. For me, when I transferred, I was looking at a lot of different places to go, but I had a restricted list. And so what that meant was there's a list of schools I could not go to for various reasons. I was in the ACC, so anything like Clemson, Notre Dame, UNC, NC State, Wake Forest, none of those. Could not go to any of those, Syracuse, like the list goes on. And then we had a list of schools that we were playing the following year that I could not go to. A good example of this is I'm a kid that's from Georgia. I was looking to transfer possibly closer to home. There are two schools in particular that I would have considered. First is Georgia Tech, and they're in the ACC, so of course could not go there because they were on the restricted list for our conference. The next school is UGA. I was considering going back home to UGA. UGA is an awesome state school here, go Dogs, but I couldn't because we were playing UGA the next year, and so that was on my list as well. So that really limited where I could go. Not to say that like there aren't other amazing schools out in the country, it just limited like geographically where I could go. Like ACC schools are mainly on the East Coast, where I'm from. The two schools that I could have considered in Georgia, I couldn't go to because of the restricted list. So that limited where I could go. I ended up going to Kansas and loved it there, but it just, if I would have thought where I would have ended up, I didn't think it would have been Kansas. I'm so glad I ended up there, but it just wasn't my first thought. These days, student athletes don't have to worry about that. A good example is Saylor. I don't know her last name, but she played at UConn and is transferring to Arkansas, or has transferred to Arkansas. And I don't know exactly why Saylor has transferred, but a good example is that she transferred in the middle of the year and now can go to Arkansas, and I'm pretty sure she's able to play basically right away. Of course, there are learning curves that happen. You have new teammates, you need to get acclimated, it's a new school, new state, like all of that stuff. But that would happen regardless. I'm so glad that now you can make a decision that works for you, and you just have to deal with the actual transferring, like the learning curves of transferring, and not so much all the extra rules the NCAA had in there before. But let's talk about why the transfer portal is now crazy. It's going crazy, all this stuff. Well, because of these rules. I think now more than ever, student athletes have the opportunity to pick out and actually identify a situation that is not healthy for them, or they don't like, or they want to get away from, and choose a different environment. I think now more than ever, the onus is on the coaches to have healthy environments for their athletes. And there will always be the athlete that's like, I feel like I don't get enough playing time, like I want to leave it. And they should be able to. I hate how people always say that is like a bad reason to leave. I want to also talk about how it's different on the men's and women's side. So if a guy says that, it's like, he knew his worth, like good for him, like you go somewhere else where you can play. If a girl says that, it's always like she just couldn't get her act together. It's not like she knows her worth type of conversation. I wish that it was a little bit more fair. And I do understand that there are different things, like end goals at the end of it. For men, they have these awesome professional contracts that they can look forward to. On the women's side, the contracts need some work. They're not as great, and so maybe that plays a part into why the conversation is so different. But I think it should be more similar. Also, I'm just so glad that athletes can now pick out opportunities that are better for them. And I think oftentimes in the past, college athletes got stuck in schools because they would have to sit out for a year. I've already talked about a little bit of this in a video that I had with Brianna DuBose of Black and Ball, and I will link that in the card above. But we talk a little bit about her transfer process, how she was never going to play for her coach, and how her coach literally said that to her. And then she decided to transfer, and she did have to sit out a year, and how that kind of is a bit unfair because you're coming from this toxic environment and you should just be able to play. You should be able to leave a toxic environment and not be penalized for it. So with this newfound freedom of being able to choose an environment that is healthy for athletes, that is to me the biggest reason why the transfer portal has gone crazy, as people like to say. The other part that the media tends to forget and doesn't really want to talk too much about is college coaches play a big part in why the transfer portal is what it is. Whether kids feel like they're in a toxic environment or not, that's a huge part of it, but that's not the part I want to focus on today. I want to focus on the fact that coaches leave. Coaches leave schools, and that changes everything for student athletes. In the past, when I was playing, coaches were able to leave schools, and now student athletes would have to stick around and figure out who the next coach is. Do I want to be here for it? Do they have a system that works for me? Do I fit into their system? And if they wanted to leave, they would have to sit out, which is kind of unfair because you have a coach now going from one school to another, no penalty, getting paid possibly more. That's the whole point, right? And there's no penalty for them, but their student athletes are penalized. A good example of this is Brian Kelly. He's the coach was the coach at Notre Dame for football, and he left to go to LSU. I can only imagine the number of guys that want to transfer now. And it's not because they don't believe in Notre Dame, they don't love the school, they don't think the new coach is going to be great. It's the fact that this is not what they were sold when they were recruits. And so now they have the opportunity, and they should have the opportunity to choose something that's better for them, something that makes sense for them. And so some of them may explore the transfer portal and decide that, hey, I think Notre Dame is still the best decision for me. But giving them the opportunity to choose that for themselves is so, so important. And I think the media loves to talk about how the transfer portal is going crazy. These kids are all over the place. And it's no. If we talk about how much coaches move around, I think it kind of helps to explain why the transfer portal is what it is. It can be crazy for a number of reasons, and I think a lot of those reasons do actually lean on coaches and the programs that they create. But one of the reasons that no one really talks too much about is the fact that coaches leave, and that changes everything for athletes. And they should be able to make decisions that work for them based on the information they have in front of them. With that said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Just wanted to kind of bring that to light, talk a little bit about the transfer portal. I do want to touch on the fact that I did transfer. I was a graduate transfer. So I transferred and played right away because I had graduated from my institution. That was a rule back when I was playing. I don't really think it's a rule now that you can just transfer and play anywhere at any time and all that stuff, but that is kind of a little bit about how I ended up transferring. If you'd like more information on that, please feel free to leave a comment. I have a long story on that. It was really involved, and not your typical transfer process, but I can get to that on another time. If you enjoyed this video, please consider liking, subscribing, and hitting the bell notification so you don't miss a video from me. I post every Thursday, so would love to have you a part of our family. I hope you guys have a great day, and I'll talk to you guys next week.